Hi there. In this week's edition of The Wrap, we're looking at the difficult lessons emerging from the taxi violence in Cape Town, the latest business news, plus an exciting achievement for the Explain.co.za team. So let's dive into your weekly simple news update brought to you by Verashni Pillay and the Explain.co.za team. First up, some exciting news for the Explain.co.za team. We have won an award. The product you're reading right now has won an international award. This week, the Explain team were doing black backflips when we heard that the weekly wrap was named the best news literacy project in Africa. It was awarded by the World Association of Newspapers, and we're pretty chuffed. The newsletter started off 2 years ago, put together by Verashni, working from her lounge in her pajamas. In between holding a full-time job, we're now a 7-person team working from our offices in Auckland Park. The weekly wrap goes through 4 checks, including fact checks, as Verashni told the 5FM team this 5FM this week, talking about the win. This is a vindication of our work. We believe news doesn't have to be boring, confusing, or depressing. We want to keep you informed and even make you laugh sometimes, while bringing you hope and solutions. And with 30,000 people now subscribing to the wrap, we found a community who agrees. Our next step is to open up donations. Look out for that later this year. Winners of the 2021 Digital Media Africa Awards will go through to compete on an international stage at the IFRA World Digital Media Awards 2021. Join us in hoping that the wrap takes the top award there as well. P.S. Feel free to drop us a message with your response. We love hearing from you guys. Up next is our big story, which is taxi violence in Cape Town. An uneasy peace has settled over Cape Town after a rather drastic decision was taken to tackle the deadly taxi violence plaguing the city. Desperate authorities on Saturday suspended the contested route for 2 months. This after repeated failed attempts to mediate with the warring taxi factions. Some background, over 80 people have been killed in the all-out war between Kata and Kadeta over the lucrative Paarl to Bellville route. The taxi association split in the early 1990s and have borne a grudge against each other since. The violence has ramped up with drivers, passengers and bystanders killed and injured. While the taxi associations and the umbrella association are included in Cape Town's integrated transport plan, the real issue is why we have these minibus taxis in the first place. The Group Areas Act of the 1950s saw black, coloured and Asian communities brutally kicked out of more central, affluent areas and dropped along the city's margins. Decades later, working class people of colour still live very far from their places of work, thanks to downright distorted spatial reality apartheid left us with. Consider the fact that it's nearly 50 kilometers from Begweni's informal settlement in Paarl to Bellville. So, what's next? The route is suspended for 2 months and the army has been stationed to ensure that Kata and Kodeta don't try anything. More Golden Arrow buses have been deployed to help people get around. There were reports earlier this week that many people still feared using taxis and some children had not reported to school as their parents were worried about violence. The province's transport department is the regulator for routes in the Western Cape and is looking for a permanent close of certain routes, which needs a formal legal process and gazetting. Some of the routes are not optimal for commuters who have to take multiple taxis as drivers are scared to go into contested territory. What has come out of this is an intractable situation. However, out of this intractable situation, however, is rather welcome across large sections of society. The ANC-led government and the DA-led government worked hard together to try and find a solution, while opposition figures like Bantu Olomisa and Zwalinzima Vavi also tried to help, and churches prayed. We want to see more of this, politicians putting aside their differences and actively seeking solutions. On to our briefs now. The first one is in Olympic roundup, COVID tests, biles, twisties, and some medals for South Africa. A very different Olympic Games is taking place in Tokyo right now, with very few fans allowed to watch the live events and daily COVID tests for athletes. But there's still plenty of action on the field, track, court, and in the pool. At the time of writing this, Team SA has won 2 medals, both in the water. Surfer Bianca Buntendach took silver in the waves, and Tajana Schoonmaker picked up silver in the pool during the 50-meter final. We'll keep setting some alarms for stupid o'clock in the next few days to support our athletes as they go for gold, silver, or bronze. Probably the biggest story of the week is legendary US gymnast Simone Biles withdrawing from the women's team final, an all-round final. She withdrew from the team event on Tuesday after suffering twisties described by The Guardian as a word for mental block in which gymnasts lose their spatial awareness in the middle of complex skills. Biles has been roundly hailed for trusting her gut. After all, while it isn't a cute name, twisties can lead to a gymnast being seriously injured while performing absurdly athletic and often dangerous moves. The decision highlighted once again that athletes must take their mental health as seriously as they do their physical condition. And it's a good reminder for all of us, if Simone Biles, arguably the greatest gymnast of the modern era, can take a step back and give herself time to grapple with her mental health, you can too. On to our next brief now. It is Big Brother is watching. Seriously. Several heads of state, including our very own President Cyril Ramaphosa, have been targeted by spies, we heard last week. The shocking revelations emerged from thanks to Pegasus Project, an international investigative journalism initiative exposing authoritarian governments for spying on journalists, activists, politicians, and business people. The report was based on a leaked spy report from 2020 and revealed the spyware can read messages, record phone calls, see pictures, and so much more. It's so scary. The spyware is sold by Israeli technology firm NSO Group. News 24 reported that Ramaphosa was of special interest to Rwanda. We don't know why yet, but we do know Rwanda's increasingly dictatorial president, Paul Kagame, has been accused of spying on his opponents across the world, many of whom disappear or turn up dead. His former spy chief was famously found dead, possibly strangled, in a South African hotel in 2014. So, just to be clear, Ramaphosa is not spying on us, but there's no way of knowing if anyone else the software sneakily installs on your mobile device if you click on a link in a suspicious message or answer a phone call. It's that easy. Experts say if you think you are a potential target, rebooting your phone frequently, switching it on and off, could in theory wipe off the software if it is stored on your phone's memory. Good news, the COVID-19, the good news edition. First up, we back to level 3 and alcohol is back on the shelves. Plus, your kids can finally go back to school. Secondly, the over 35 cohort has been flocking to vaccination sites even though if you're over the age of 35, then it's just days before you can officially go get your vaccine, if you haven't already. Meanwhile, those over 18 are next in line. It's easy to forget just how impossible getting a vaccine looked just a few months ago. We were dogged by headlines about failed negotiations between government, big pharma, one roadblock after the other. Timelines have shifted by nearly 2 months. People aged over 40 and above would have only started getting their vaccines in September, but this cohort became eligible for the jab in July instead. Other measures point to how things have been sped up. Government initially aimed to have 40 million vaccinated by March 2022. Now it looks like we'll reach that milestone sooner. The new goal is to have 35 million people vaccinated by Christmas. But being pessimistic South Africa, we haven't really celebrated this positive development. About 7 million South Africans have been vaccinated to date. Over 250,000 are being vaccinated daily, and the Aspen facility in Gqeberha is ready to release its first fully completed J&J vaccines. It's more than a lot of countries can say. Australia had the means and clout to secure vaccines, but did not do so fast enough and is behind on its program, while the US is trying to bribe large swaths of people with cash and lottery tickets. Speaking of skepticism, it's okay if you're feeling a little hesitant or worried about the vaccine and how it will affect your body. It is your choice, but it comes with a warning label. The fewer people who get vaccinated, the greater the likelihood of new variants popping up, because the virus will continue to spread, which we would simply hate to see. So before refusing the jab, research it. Assessing the Red Berets 8 years on. This week, the Economic Freedom Fighters celebrated 8 years since its launch, back on the back of Julius Malema's expulsion from the ANC Youth League. While many have been appalled by the EFF's politics of chauvinism, fearing the party wouldn't toe the democratic line, Malema and co. have worked within the system and followed the rules, mostly. It's a measure of the strength of our electoral systems and the courts that the EFF hasn't headed up a populist uprising. It last scored just 10.80% of the vote. As the youngest mainstream party, it is certainly has an outsized influence compared to its share of the vote, and has driven conversations like hashtag pay back the money, hashtag fees must fall, and hashtag bring back the land in parliament. The fighters have loads of energy and should be commended for their focus on education. They're probably the most educated politicians around, and their brave stance against xenophobia, which hasn't gone down well with many of their supporters. But the party often disappoints, too often, mostly in its flip-flopping on crucial issues, and its tendency towards racist, sexist, and other deeply problematic statements and politics. Not to mention the sheer bullying and allegations of corruption. When its members do the hard work of being lawmakers in parliaments, many committees, they really shine. Floyd Shibambo's grasp of corporate tax evasion is impressive, but they don't do this enough. The focus should have been on its achievement this week. Instead, the party was at the center of an uproar. The party's Twitter account posted a congratulatory video from DJ Fresh, an accused rapist who has been removed from his 94.7 show over the allegations, which he denies. Feminists within the party have criticized its decision to leave the post up. It was especially disturbing to see the followers of the party who reacted to criticism by threatening DJ Fresh's accuser with rape and violence, leading feminist activists, some of them like Simon Kelekavu, a long-standing party member, to publicly denounce the EFF, vowing never to vote for it again. 350 Rand relief grant reintroduced. What can 350 Rand buy a month buy? If you earn less than 800 Rands a month, which according to the UN report from December is true for 1 in 5 South Africans, the answer is quite a lot. That's why the reintroduction of the 350 Rand Social Relief of Distress grant is good news for many. It means food on the table, taxi fare, an item of clothing or medication. The grant will go to 10 million South Africans in dire need of financial support who have been specifically affected by COVID-19 and the recent unrest. Ramaphosa made a special announcement on Sunday saying the slight improvement in revenue collection will fund the grant, set to stay in place until March 2022. Finance Minister Tito Mboweni said the grant will cost the government around 27 billion rand. This time, people including unemployed caregivers who currently receive childcare grants also qualify. If you or anyone you know is eligible, apply for the grant at www.gov.coronavirus.socialgrants. And the AI chatbot is the new OJA board. If you could chat with a friend or relative who has passed away, would you? Well, if you really want to, you may just be able to. In a scene straight out of a dystopian series, Black Mirror, a Canadian man desperate to connect with his late fiancée used artificial intelligence to have conversations with her. He logged onto a chat website called the Project December, then fed details about his late lover into the chatbot, including some text messages and personal characteristics. The system basically manufactures a digital version of your loved one as a chatbot so you can text them as if they were alive. We won't lie, it's a little bit freaky. And here's your business brief. Tiger Brand recalls veg products. Tiger Brands has recalled nearly 20 million of its Koo and Hugo vegetable products manufactured between 1st May 2019 and 5th of May 2021 after a side seal leak was detected in 2 cans. In a statement, Tiger Brands said there have been no reports of serious health issues related to the affected product range. The recall caused quite the uproar, bringing memories of the infamous listeriosis outbreak, in which its processed meat division, which it has since sold, was implicated. You can find the manufacturing date at the bottom of the can, and if it falls within that date range, you can return it to a supermarket for a refund. Mangoes go down. South African Airways subsidiary Mango suspended flights and services from the 27th of July after the airline failed to pay navigation services to the body responsible for informing pilots where to fly to prevent collisions. This is a further blow to Mango, which entered into a business rescue earlier this week. The airline was already in poor standing, having made its last profit in 2018. And was further hit by COVID-19 travel restrictions. A company in business rescue is handed over to practitioner to see if it can somehow be saved. If not, it's liquidated. If you have a Mango flight booked, you can email them at inquiries@flymango.com. Transnet is back on track. You may have missed this, but last week Transnet's IT systems were targeted by a cyber attack. It led to major chaos and disruption at the port's main terminal, and the company declared a force majeure, which means unforeseen circumstances that prevent a company from fulfilling contracts. Thankfully, things are almost back to normal. News 24 reported that most of the ports are back up and running. Though the force majeure will remain in place for a few days, before likely being lifted. South African artists taken to court, the SABC taken to court over the music royalties. South African artists work with little protection and support, despite the important work they do. So, it's devastating to hear that the SABC has been accused of hoarding millions in royalties meant for musicians. SAMPRA, the South African Music Performance Rights Association, the body responsible for collecting royalties on behalf of artists, announced last week that it would be hauling the public broadcaster to court. The larger issue here is, though, that legislation fails to protect artists' rights and earnings, especially when it comes to royalties. This leaves many vulnerable to record labels who tie them to exploitative contracts. But it's not just record labels that the musicians should watch out for. According to Sampra, the SABC owes musicians a collective 250 million rands in outstanding royalty payouts. The SABC denies the allegations and says the real issue here is a dispute between itself and the music industry's collection bodies. Whatever the case, industry bodies and the SABC have to sit around the table, find a solution that will enrich the lives of the country's musicians. Hopefully, with the intervention of the courts, musicians who have long been without an income due to the pandemic will have a much needed cash injection. That's it from us at The Wrap, a product of explain.co.za, simple news summaries for busy people. Remember to share the love, tell your friends to sign up for updates at www.explain.co.za/subscribe. Till next time, goodbye from me and the team.